Christmas Carol, 5 quotes, 5 themes, as quick as I damn well can. We begin with Scrooge, a wheezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching old sinner. This gives us the Christian context of the novel. It's also deliberately hyperbolic, an over-exaggeration of this villain. Why? Because it is a novel about redemption. Dickens wants to portray him as this exaggerated miser at the beginning, hence the list of all those adjectives, to show how he changes at the end. Because the moral of this story is going to be that the reader too not only can change, but must change. This leads us to Christmas. It is a Christmas story, and the whole point of this redemption is that the Christian story of Christmas teaches Scrooge to change the moral of his ways. You're obviously familiar with the 3 ghosts who appear from the past, present and future, and also Jacob Marley, but there is a 5th ghost. The narrator is a ghost who is described as standing by our elbow at one point. So, this is the point of view of the ghost who needs Scrooge to change as well. He is a kind of warning to us, the reader, of what will become of you if you don't change your ways. You'll become a ghost, eternally doomed to walk the earth. And obviously, this is a contrast to the happiness that Scrooge wants. What Dickens is suggesting is that holding on to our possessions and not helping others will lead us to misery. And the way to happiness is actually to divest ourselves of our wealth. Not completely, but to seek to help others. Our second quotation: if they would rather die, they had better do it. This, of course, just isn't Scrooge. This is the political view of the time. The political classes, in fact, Dickens' readers, those rich people who could afford this 5-shilling book when Bob's salary is only 15 shillings, so the book costs a third of a salary. And yet he's showing utter contempt for the poor, because that's what society did. They had the poor laws, which he references, they had the workhouses, which he references, and the solution that society is putting in place for poverty is to demonise the poor, to accuse them of being lazy and work shy, putting them to work for hardly any money. The conditions are so terrible that people would rather not go and risk death on the streets. There is no sympathy from Scrooge, but Dickens' wider social point is this is no way for society to treat the poor, and as we will see, if we don't treat the poor better, there will be dangers to all of us. It's linked to the Christmas message because Scrooge is portraying the opposite of a Christian point of view. The idea of ghosts, this isn't going to link to. The idea of happiness, though, it is. It is the social happiness of everyone in society that the rich can change. And obviously, we're looking at the idea of redemption again. We're going to go back to that quote because you will remember that when he asks about Tiny Tim, the ghost repeats his words back to him and says about Tiny Tim, why then he'd better die. Our third quote, Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live, is in stave 3, the very centre of the novel, and it is the heart of the message of the novel. Because remember, at the end of the novel, he is going to become a second father to Tiny Tim. So a major theme here is how we need to be responsible like a father to those people less fortunate. He creates Tiny Tim not only because Tiny Tim is a child, but because he is a disabled child. So yes, he's going to tug at our heartstrings, but he's also going to say, well, what happens to the disabled in our society? The implication from the ghost's reply is that they will die. In other words, if we don't change how we relate to the poor and how we look after them as a society, they're going to die. That's brutal, and it's the opposite of the Christmas message. So You need to bring in here that Dickens deliberately published this at Christmas. I think it was something like the 21st of December, because this is when he knew that his readers would be at their most giving. Yes, there's a cynical element. They would be willing to spend the money on the book, but also it's about how they're then going to spend the money helping others. Clearly, he's linking poverty not just in the general population, but to children, what's going to happen to them, and to disability. This is a portion of society that's been completely neglected. We can link it clearly to the ghost again. He asked the ghost of Christmas present. Now, because this death of Tiny Tim is such a big deal, this ghost of Christmas present actually has the power to see into the future, which is supposed to be the preserve of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. So this is a way that Dickens signals how important this moment is in the novel and how important this idea is in society. Clearly, in order for him to find redemption, he's got to find a way to save Tiny Tim's life, and we as readers need to find redemption by saving the lives of the poor. In the same stave, and therefore also pivotal to Dickens' point of view, is this warning that the same ghost gives when Scrooge spots the figures of ignorance and want. But most of all, he says, because he says beware them both, most of all, beware this boy, ignorance, for on his brow I see that written which is doom. So again, we've got this hyperbolic language, but whereas here it was for our entertainment, here it is a real warning. It's a political warning, and Dickens is saying, look, if we leave the poor uneducated, ignorant, then they will not be able to transform their lives by getting paid employment, or at least not employment that will pay much. Ignorance leads to more poverty leads to more social unrest, and that is where doom comes in. 3 years after the publication of this novel, revolution spread across most of Europe. It didn't spread to the UK. Dickens is anticipating this. He can see the political mood. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the massive growth in schooling and education that happened in England prevented us from having a revolution. You don't have to go into that much detail, but it's clearly what Dickens is warning about. The poor will rise up and pronounce doom to the rich. Revolution will be coming. A contextual clue that will really help you is that his previous novel was A Tale of Two Cities, an account of the French Revolution. So revolution was uppermost in his mind. Let's see how that fits our themes. Well, clearly the consequence of poverty is violence and crime. The Christmas message is, again, we need to look after the poor. What's the biggest gift we can give them? An education. The ghosts, well, ignorance and want are also within the ghost's fold. So they are also ghosts who bring a warning to Scrooge and therefore to us, the reader. What is the secret of happiness? Getting rid of ignorance in society and want, which is poverty. That's going to make all of society happy. And then obviously, Scrooge's redemption is going to be our redemption when we change how we spend our taxes, how we give our charity. Number 5. I'll raise your salary. So this is right from the very end, and it's what he says to Bob. And then I've got an ellipsis here because there's a bit in between. He let them laugh. Now, I wanted to put in here also how we became second father to Tiny Tim, but I'm going to link that to here. So, why does the end of the novel finish with Scrooge deciding to raise Bob's salary? Because that is actually the message of the book. Bob is paid 15 shillings, also known as 15 Bob. So Bob is named after the money that he is paid. Dickens couldn't be any clearer that this is all about what you pay your employees. Now, a middle class or wealthy reader in Dickens' time would have had several servants in the house, a cook, a maid, possibly a manservant or a butler, and they would have paid lots of other people who delivered stuff from the butcher, from the grocers. All kinds of things would have been delivered by regular employees. Now, because all the poor had flocked to the cities, people didn't have to pay much because there was always another person who would come along and take the job for a low salary. Bob is paid 15 shillings a week and still stays with Scrooge. That tells us categorically that Bob must be being paid at least the going rate. Dickens' political message, therefore, is, remember this terrible miser I told you about at the beginning of this book? Well, actually, he's paying his employee the same as every other employer. So the whole of society is therefore like Scrooge, because if Bob needed more money and he could just get it going somewhere else, well, you know he would, but he can't. That is the going rate. So this is why Dickens focuses on the salary. And the salary has to be enough, not just to look after Bob, but also the Cratchit family. Scrooge references this specifically, and it's why in Stave 3, Dickens takes us to the Cratchit family Christmas to show how Bob's salary can't possibly help them manage enough. So, you've got that clear political message to the readers: pay your people more, not just give to charity, not just vote for a fairer political system, but also tomorrow, go out tomorrow and start paying people more. That is his actual message. And then he let them laugh. This is crucial because many of these middle and upper class readers would have thought, if I pay people more when I don't have to because everyone else is paying less, people will laugh at me. But that won't lead to redemption, and it won't lead to changing the poverty of the working class. And so Dickens addresses that fear in the reader and says, well, look, even this terrible guy, Scrooge, he managed not to worry about social ridicule and people laughing at him. He just carried on and lived a life that benefited others. That links us to the Christmas message about giving. It links us to the didactic lesson that the ghosts have taught him. He's finally learnt it. The secret of happiness has been to give away his wealth and look after others. And his redemption has led to that happiness and is a role model for the rest of us. 5 quotes, 5 themes, every essay covered. Genius. Good luck in the exam.